Are you prepared to transform your well-being? I'm Sanjay Raja. My mission is to challenge our perspectives on food, fitness, and overall health. I own a successful nutrition and fitness business based in Orlando, Florida. And through this experience, I've learned that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. From creating delicious and healthy recipes, to training elite athletes, and even writing the book, The Food Talk. I've accumulated a wealth of knowledge, but here's the exciting part. There's always more to discover. That's why I'm embarking on a journey to connect with leading experts, unveiling the secrets to a happier, healthier life. Together, let's explore innovative ways to enhance our well-being. This is Recipe for Wellness. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Season 2 of our podcast, Recipe for Wellness. So it's interesting. We've got so much going on in the background, and why this guest is so relevant is because we are going to be headed to Bali in next month, in June. So literally 2.5 weeks away, and we're going to be filming this guest at a nice health and wellness retreat in Bali. And she actually spends a lot of time out there, and I've had a little bit of time to speak with her about the culture, the people. I've been out there once, but she spent way more time out there than I have, so I've learned so much already. She's got a lot of accolades to her name, and like we always talk about, this show is not just about health and wellness. It's about exploring non-traditional health and wellness, but her story is really interesting because it's very similar to mine as well. So, without further ado, I am so pleased to welcome Sue Van Raes, correct?
Thank
Sue?
you.
Yes, we were introduced by my executive producer, Melanie, and you've got so much going on. So give the audience just a quick rundown of who you are, what you're about, and what your message is, and then I just want to get into so many topics that I think are going to be interesting for the audience.
Thank you. It's so good to be here with you. I'm so excited to share this episode. And yeah, so I am the founder of Boulder Nutrition in Boulder, Colorado, which was founded in 2003. And it's both a private practice. And over the years, I've added in many online courses and women's wellness and yoga retreats locally and internationally. I wrote a book that came out last spring called Food and Freedom: Discover Your Personal Recipe to Eat, Think, and Live Well. And that has been so much fun to get into the world and launch. And yeah, and so I really love working one-on-one with folks to help them both with functional nutrition and food psychology. And also, of course, I bring in lots of different wellness tips and tricks on my bigger retreats and things like that. So it's such a passion of mine to be able to do this work in the world.
No, I think it's much needed. Absolutely. My background was I started in health and wellness probably 2011, just fixing myself from a successful career in being a professional athlete. Kind of you competed at a high level, and just fixing the issues that I had. And one of the things I mentioned in season 1, episode 3, we were in New York City. And each episode, I kind of reveal more and more about myself, get very personal with the audience. And one of the things I mentioned is that for somebody who likes to travel the world, try new foods, and do all these things, I've had to overcome a lot of eating disorders over time. And those started because of training like an athlete and just having to follow strict regimens. And that's what people don't see, is that you got this shiny thing outside that we show, our avatar, which is great conditioning. We look good. We can perform at a high level. But internally, I was fighting a battle, which is sticking to these crazy diets I had to do and just staying in conditioning pretty much year round. So I think you're one of the right people to ask this question to. Is give us a little bit of background first, which is you were a high level gymnast, you mentioned to me, in college. And did you have to follow a crazy regimen in your diet to really compete at a high level? And if so, was that hard for you to break away from to kind of maintain a normal life?
It's a very good question. I started on my gymnastics journey when I was 6. And so
Hmm.
it was really like the majority of my childhood all the way through college. And so there was a few different iterations of it that were interesting to experience.
Hmm.
When I was young, it was more about not eating junk food and like not drinking soda. And that was sort of the parameters, which looking back was a great way to eat and live, but it didn't really look at the other aspects of what we were eating as much. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until I got older when I started to notice the different fluctuations in my performance and my energy and even my ability to like stay, really positive about my sport because at times I wasn't getting enough of certain macronutrients. So my blood sugar was off and I was finally diagnosed with severe hypoglycemia in my older years of gymnastics, and that finally started to make a huge difference in all of the different pieces that I was bringing in from a health and wellness perspective. I was also studying human biology and physiology in college at the time, so there was a lot of opportunity for me to kind of revamp a lot throughout my entire gymnastics career. But really,
Hmm.
where I landed that feels really good still to this day is learning what my metabolism needed and what my blood sugar needed to be stable so that I could actually continue on with this pretty rigorous training and sport that took up so much of my life at that point, like 20 plus hours a week of training. And so it really became a mission for me in my own life to figure this out for myself. And then, of course, to help other people. Eventually, I know that that's a big reason why I do the work that I do today. I had
Hmm.
really important mentors in my life. One was my childhood chiropractor. It was very rare to go to the chiropractor when I was like 10 years old in the 80s. Um,
Hmm.
I did have injuries and some spinal stuff happening, and my mom's closest friend got a job working for a chiropractor, and that was the only reason we ended up there. But the chiropractor, she was trained as a naturopathic doctor and chiropractor, which was when they were still in the same uh, certification early on. And so she really taught me about eating healthy, and I would drink herbal tea, and trail mix was always out at her office. And that's kind of when I started this breadcrumb trail of really being inspired by some alternative eating and more healthy eating than what I grew up with in the 80s, which was a lot of like Cheerios and Pop Tarts and the things that most people ate for breakfast as young kids. So I really credit her for giving me, an understanding of how I could shift how I felt in my body with food. And still to this day, I mean, I'm teaching and helping and guiding so many people in eating to feel how they want to feel. And that's something that I'm so glad that I learned early on. And of course, it just kept compounding with more and more experience and research and knowledge and all the different things my life led me to. But it really did start this path for me of wanting to understand how food impacts our biochemistry. And I'm so glad I learned that because it's become such a huge passion of mine.
Well, there's so many, and I tell people this all the time. That is, I get questions like this, which is, what diet should I follow? Right. And I get, there's so many diets out there, but diet by its true nature is unsustainable. Right. So I always talk to people about lifestyle change, which is, what is it something you can implement into your daily life that you don't have to think twice about? We get up, we eat every day. Great. We're going to do that. Now, what can you implement in your life that you can add that's to your benefit that you don't have to think twice about, right? And that comes with the territory of motivation versus discipline, which is, motivation is, I can motivate you, I can pump you up, and you feel great for that moment. But then when you're by yourself, nobody's watching, do you have that same level of enthusiasm, right? So that's where the discipline part comes in, right? So when you talk about nutrition, there's a lot of influencers out there. There's a lot of people who've been in the space for a very long time. And what is it so different about your message and the way you work with people that's given you longevity in a really crowded space?
Thank you. That's a great question. So, a couple things come to mind. So, one of the things that I really focus on in my work is customized precision nutrition. And it's really become apparent to me with, elaborate studying for the last few decades that, we really all don't need the same exact things. And there's ways and nuances and ways we can strategize within our metabolic health to customize our eating. And when I learned that piece, and then when I learned what my body needed within that same sort of realm, it really started to shift. And so that's a really big piece for me is how can we look at individual. And when I first started studying my master's degree, I remember having this exact question, like, which eating style, let's call it, are we going to suggest at Boulder Nutrition? You know what I mean? I was like, this one,
Hmm.
that one, paleo, vegan, whatever. Like, there's so many things out there that are even kind of slotted into the healthy realm. And when you start looking at that, it's interesting because some people thrive on different versions of that and others don't. And what one person might do great on, I've noticed, someone else, even their own sister or mother, might not. And so I know for me, like looking back at my childhood, I can see how I was a metabolic disaster from a blood sugar perspective on my early childhood. And so I had all these symptoms, but I functioned, but I had some symptoms that were like persistent as a young kid. But my siblings, they didn't. They didn't have hypoglycemia. They didn't have the same struggles that I had, and we were generally eating a similar diet, with our at our family home. And so that's been a big piece of my work is starting to uncover what each person needs on an individual level and giving them a chance to try it out, of course, and see what works and how they feel different and how food can really shift the way they feel day to day. And then secondly, kind of what you're saying, how are you keeping people motivated? How are you staying motivated? How are people staying on track? And, that's really where the food psychology part of my business and my work comes in because there's many different ways that we relate to food as individuals and they're quite complicated and complex and different people, right? We've all got our food stories and they look very different from each other's based on the different things we've done in our lives and the different family traditions we've experienced and the different messages that we've learned as kids from our
Hmm.
parents or teachers or even from school friends that made fun of us or what have you. And so unpacking that is so important and like looking at what actually is true rather than the stories that we repeat over and over again, sometimes for years in our own minds. But interestingly enough, what I find is when we can link how we feel to the food we're eating, I find that's where the magic happens for so many people. But
Hmm.
often we're not really paying attention. So we might eat something and then we might not feel good a few hours later, but we might not really think about it that much. We might just kind of be like, well, something's off today. I feel tired or sluggish or grumpy or whatever it is. But when we start to actually play the detective in our own lives and we start to actually attach and become aware of what food is doing internally for us, whether that be positive or negative, it really helps because I've noticed that if somebody gets really sick from eating dairy and they didn't really realize it for a really long time, they might just keep eating dairy because they're not really, aware of what's causing their stomach aches or what's causing their headaches or whatever it is. But the minute they start to be like, oh, every time I eat this food, I feel this negative symptom, they are going to start to actually not want the food as much.
Mm.
And it's really amazing. I mean, I remember my own son actually being allergic to dairy, and I took him down to Pearl Street in Boulder, Colorado for the mall crawl on Halloween. We were walking down the street, and he was dressed up, and his little brother was like 2 or something, and we passed Ben and Jerry's, and they were handing out these little mini ice cream cones to the kids. And my son was like, "Can I get an ice cream cone? Can I get an ice cream cone?" And, it was Halloween and I was like trying to not be too rigid. So I was like, sure, if you really want an ice cream cone, that's fine. So he goes to get it and he comes back and we walk like less than half a block and he hasn't even had any yet. And he's holding it and he looks at me, looks back and he goes, this is going to make me feel sick. And he walks over to the trash can and puts it in the trash. And I was just like, wow, that is so much more impactful than me saying you can't have an ice cream cone, right? Because he made the
Yeah.
connection. And
Yeah. So eating with intention is real important. It's funny. It's like everybody talks about dating with intention, right? Getting out there and dating with intention. But I've talked about this so many times, and that is, and you're touching upon it, which is we don't think about food as something that has a use, right? We think about it as a crutch in our emotional state. A lot of people do that. So they're
mm,
tying the emotions to food, obviously.
yeah.
And I published a book in 2018 about children's health and wellness and teaching kids good habits so they don't have to go through the obesity journey that some of us did. And one of the things I found was our cultural background influences our food choices. So,
100.
and so that's why I'm always being a detective as to why are you making these choices, just much like you are. And so let's talk about this because it's an interesting point because when you think about somebody who is eating to basically forget a memory or to change their emotional state, how do you guide them in that journey to say to them, okay, why are we doing what we're doing? And how do you get them on a new path?
Yeah, and this is like really, really a lot of the work I do, a lot of the heart
Mhm.
of the work that I do, because first we figure out the biochemical piece and the metabolism piece and get people feeling like at least they're eating in a balanced manner. That
Mhm.
actually helps with the emotional eating because when we're eating in a balanced manner, our emotions tend to be a lot more in balance. So, number one, that's the foundation for me. And that's one thing I think that really distinguishes my work from a lot of people out there is like, I really, really believe that we can work with that ground level first and make some big shifts. But then we have what's left, right? We have what's left, which is using food to regulate our nervous systems, using food to numb out feelings that are uncomfortable or that
Mhm.
we're just used to numbing out. Like the first impulse when we feel a sensation or a feeling in our body is to like get out of it. So we just reach for whatever that food is that we normally reach for. And of course, that can be on a minor scale or it can be on a grandiose scale where we're doing that constantly because we don't know how to really work with the feelings that we have going on. A lot of the work that I teach is to first recognize like what is the feeling that you're avoiding? Because some people are doing this so automatically. In fact, most people are doing this so automatically. They're not thinking about the shame that they got experienced as a child every time they reach for a Jolly Rancher. They are just noticing this habitual pattern that's reaching for Jolly Ranchers every time they feel like they didn't perform well at work or something, but they might not be going all the way back to where it started. So, as we start to peel away the layers, we can actually start to uncover some of the root causes, some of the root feelings, some of the origin stories that people have. And I'm sure you've done this a lot in your work as well, especially with yoga and meditation that we also both have in common. And that is, can we just give ourselves a minute, even a minute, to feel the feeling? To become aware of the sensation in our body. One thing that I really love to teach is to even take away the story attached to the feeling and go deep into the nuance of the actual sensation in our bodies that that feeling that we don't like is bringing up. And what I've noticed in my own practice is the feelings and sensations that are happening. Maybe it's a stressful, an anxious thought or feeling, or something that feels heavy and clunky in your body where you're just like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. When we actually sit there with it for a period of time, it generally, I've noticed, doesn't hurt. And it's actually generally some clenching or tingling or energy moving or heat in the body. And as we can start to become the witness to it, instead of feeling like we're succumbed inside of a tornado of it, it
Mhm.
seems like most people can start to find some inner peace with knowing that this feeling or sensation isn't actually going to hurt them and that if they can sit with it long enough to watch it move through. I've done this a lot myself. If I wake up in the middle of the night, like with an anxious thought or feeling, I've noticed that like I get tingly in my body. And
Mm.
what I've done and learned how to do is just watch the tingling. And if I watch the tingling, like I'm just watching a TV show, I'm not spinning in my head as much because now my focus is tingling. And it really helps to become aware of those nuances in the body and watch them move through. And generally, what I'll notice is it'll move through, the tingling will get less, and I'll fall back asleep. If I don't do that and I give my thoughts all the power and I just go down the rabbit hole of all the things that could go wrong or all the things I'm stressed about, that can generally amplify it and make things worse. And so that's where I like to start with people is getting them into a place where their feelings are not this thing that they're so afraid of. And that way, when they make friends with them, they're not necessarily going to be reaching for food as quickly or at all to cover them up because now they're not the enemy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I think the other aspect I think we can touch upon is that it's not even so much what's how to help people, it's cutting through all the misinformation. There's so much misinformation out there, because you've got kids following TikTok trends, which are completely detrimental to them. You've got all just mass media marketing. You've got all these things that are just happening right now. And that is, we as coaches try to have a very positive influence on our clients for their betterment, but we can't combat the level of marketing they get on a daily basis,
Mhm.
right? So I always tell people, I said, how I know I did a good job is at a certain point in time, you're going to fire me. You're going to let me go. You don't need me anymore, right?
That's good.
And then I did my job. I know I did my job, right? And of course, it's in a nicer way they'll do it, but it's I see a lot of other coaches where there's keep people on for life. So you get this recurring revenue. So then it becomes more about the revenue rather than educating your client to be able to do things on their own. So how do you shape your clients in the mindset to basically be able to go, I can do this on my own? Because that's one of the hardest things to do as a coach is to give them the tools to say, I'm not going to be around, meaning there to coach you 24 hours a day. And I don't want to do that. So what tools do you give them to be able to self-regulate?
Yeah, I mean, there's an imaginary toolkit that's just built upon, right? Like layer by layer. And that can
Mhm.
be something as simple as being able to slow down your breathing, or it can be as, more elaborate within certain internal practices or ways that you can like self-soothe that are not damaging to yourself. Um,
Mhm.
but the interesting piece that I always tell my clients is like, we start working together often, like every week or every other week in the beginning to get some momentum together. And then as things get a little bit easier and better and they feel like they've got some good automatic behaviors happening and they're feeling like they're starting to really lock in with a lot of the ways that we are, strategizing together, we'll start spreading things out. And then it will be like, oh wow, we just did 30 days without checking in and now you're really like you've got this. And then at
Yep.
some point in that time frame, it's like you are totally doing this on your own and I'm here if you need me, but I don't think you're going to need me because now you've gotten the material and it's like embodied rather than, just coming from the outside. And that's really incredible thing to watch. And I've seen it with even like like young girls in high school with body image issues and disordered eating habits that are really not healthy and they're
Mhm.
really about comparison and getting themselves like off of certain social media pages and things that are just really negatively impacting their mental health. So I've seen it where the behaviors and their ability to regulate themselves around emotion and food can be just so challenging. And with just some of the ways in which we can support them in internal practices, awareness, embodiment, listening to their body, seeing and like looking for things that are just really unhealthy to watch or be around and starting to give them the power of choice, I've just seen incredible things happen, within short periods of time with regular support. And so I really think support in a way that feels safe and comforting and builds trust is like so valuable. And then that same kind of trust is truth. And truth tells us, "Whoa, you don't need me anymore." Truth
Yeah.
tells us when we can, find our own way. And honestly, the sessions when people are kind of done and they're on their own way with like a lot of good momentum, you can kind of tell because you don't have as much to talk about and there's not as many questions and there's not as much material because people are doing well. And that's always such a rewarding part of my practice. I love that.
So one of the big takeaways I learned from season one of doing the show was my physical health, my nutritional health was a daily affirmation that I've always practiced, but I was really neglecting my emotional health. That was one of the things I walked away from. And how I could tell was we talked to all these different experts who talked about emotional health and such, and they just gave me some questions that I had to sit and think about for a while. And one of the things I've implemented within myself, which is hard for me to do, is that I give myself time off now, finally.
Mm,
So on the weekends, I'm a single dad of twins, boy and girl, who are 14. I have them every other week because I've got a 50-50 timeshare with my ex. And so the weeks that I have them, it's an interesting question because my daughter is very intuitive, and she would ask me, she says, "So what do you do for fun, Dad, when we're not here?" Right? And I say, "Oh, I work out, I work." And they're like, "Okay, that's great, but what do you do for fun?" And I really even couldn't answer that question. So that was a great question on their part. And now what I do is when I don't have them, like last weekend, hung out with friends, just sit and stared at a wall if I needed to. Didn't force myself to do work that I know is not going to be seen or going to be received over the weekend. Nobody's going to take a look at it. I used to dread holidays because I'm like, guess what? Nothing's going to get done. And so and so now I look at holidays, no, it's a time for me to relax and recharge, and I let things come to me now. So I relax more and more gets done now because I'm fully engaged into it.
mm,
So when you talk with your clients about physical health, we can work out. That's great. Talk about nutritional health. We can eat clean. That's great. How do you address the mental health aspect? Because that is the biggest thing in terms of, I would say, the biggest issue that our society is dealing with today is emotional health. Is how do you help clients regulate that?
yeah. I mean, it's like the $1 million question. And
Hmm.
it's something I'm super passionate about because so many of the people that I work with are coming in with food that is a band-aid on their emotional health. And
Yeah.
so it's very relevant in my work. And so, there's some basic practices and kind of things that I love to recommend. Nature is huge because nature seems to just help people feel
Oh
expansive
yeah.
and calm. And I mean, we have a little cabin up in the woods that we go up to most weekends. And honestly, I feel like it's the greatest gift of my life to be able to have a couple days in the mountains with nature and quiet and some moose and elk in our yard. Like that to me is the most efficient and the best way for me to spend the weekend because it really
Yep.
helps me to calm. And I just see it with my clients when they can give themselves time to get in nature, to rest, to reflect. Those those ways of being really start to put things in perspective, right? And they start to give us some ways of naturally and sustainably regulating ourselves. And what happens with a lot of the ways that society has kind of created for us to regulate and self-soothe, they tend to be not sustainable, right? They last for a little bit and then they kind of the monster we were trying to avoid comes right back. And so those are pretty simple. I mean, simple in the sense that they're available to us. Nature is there. Giving ourselves some time to rest is a very incredible practice, and so many people have a hard time slowing down. I have
Yeah.
spent so many years of my life trying to slow down. I mean, because of my gymnastics career and because I was training 20 plus hours a week for most of my childhood on top of school, like I was busy since I can remember. So I am like very good at being busy, but I know now as I get older and as, watching my life unfold that if I don't get enough downtime, there's almost like a residue of just gunk that sort of builds up and it just gets harder and harder to manage. But those moments of resetting in nature or giving ourselves some time, like journaling has been a huge thing for me just to clear my mind. Meditation has been a nice way for me to like breathe and come back to myself and just check in with myself. And so I love to teach my clients who are not already doing these sorts of things or, remind them to do them more if they already are. And what I noticed like years ago, early on in my practice, was the the clients that started doing any kind of embodiment practice accelerated way fast
Hmm.
and their healing was way quicker because they were giving themselves that time of checking in, whatever that looked like, yoga or, so many different ways of being embodied, somatic practices of any kind. And some of them are just sitting on the grass and sitting next to the river or whatever it is. So I was really like that was a really big aha moment for me when I started seeing, especially my disordered eating clients that were really struggling. When they added in any kind of embodiment practice, it just was amazing to see how much the impact shifted them. So, there's lots of those. I probably have hundreds in my list, but I try to keep it really simple for people in the beginning, especially so that it's accessible.
Well, there's a Japanese term called forest bathing, which
Yeah.
is they talk about walking in nature to get natural endorphins. And I do this practice every day. So every day after dinner, when I have the kids, we take our walk, and we're in a really nice area with lots of nature, lots of animals, especially the summertime coming out. So we see like gators and snakes because we're in Florida, so gators is a natural thing for us. We see all these birds and stuff, so it's very calm, very relaxing. So forest bathing, and yeah, I do the same thing. I do it for myself. But the other point that you brought up is that we can be really busy without being productive,
Mm. Mhm.
right? And I found
Yeah,
and that
totally.
is I would be working all weekend. I'm saying I'm busy, but am I really productive here,
Yeah.
right? And so what happens is I had to go deeper. I had to go, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because I had to keep my mind occupied. Okay, why am I doing that? Because I'm not allowing myself a break.
Yeah.
Okay. And so once I got to the heart of the matter, then I realized, wow, I deserve a break. I need a break. And guess what? Then Monday through Friday, I'm way more productive when I get my break over the weekend. I'm not living for the weekend, but I am taking advantage of the weekend now. So it's a different mindset together. And I try to impart that to some of my clients. So talk to me about that mindset, which is you are a person that is very successful, has a lot of clients, you bounce. I don't know, do you have kids?
Yeah. I have two. I single parented them for 20 years. Now they're in their 20s.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if they're living with you or not, but you've got this own life of yours now, right? How
Hmm.
do you keep yourself in a state of, I guess the easiest way to say it is a state of gratitude where you can enjoy your life. Now, like, how do you do that now? Because I think that's what people really need more of right now is that we can be successful, we can do a million things, but we got to take the time to enjoy our lives because it goes by in an instant, in a blink. I've had so many people being diagnosed with cancer who seem very healthy.
Totally.
And the saying is what? Tomorrow's never promised to us, right? So live today like it's your last day, which is hard to do for a lot of people. We get complacent. So how do you do that? How do you do that for yourself? And how do you do that for your clients to really make sure that they enjoy life and so that they can be more productive?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is probably my most like my closest personal work because
Mhm.
single parenting can be, especially when my kids were young, was super busy. and I
Yeah.
had a business, and I was juggling two kids and my business and all of it on my own without any family nearby or anything. And it was very full. But the pieces of my life that have really shown me the most results as far as joy and happiness and inner peace are being able to take in the moment and not take it for granted. And
Hmm.
I do some kind of practice around that every single day. And I'm just kind of set up at this point in my mind to focus on the things that are coming towards, towards me that I'm grateful for. Like I'm always thinking of um how to savor. Savor is actually a big practice for me. And I've learned that a lot and taken it to a new level from the Balinese, actually. But being able to fully experience life moment by moment without just living in our heads and being stuck in our to-do lists all day is is a game changer. And
Mm.
being somebody who's I have a nervous system for sure that is set at a busy fast pace, and it's been really challenging for me to like really learn to slow down over the years, and I've been practicing like very intentionally for a long time. And what I notice sometimes is I will have an inner urge, like almost like a sensation of like, to, use this energy in my body that I have, kind of circulating to get stuff done. And to be able to recognize that sometimes that can be almost like a fight or flight response that's out of date is
Yeah.
helpful. And I think a lot of us are stuck in a fight or flight response because of the way our society is set up and a lot of the social constructs that we are kind of taught as young kids, and that busyness is productive and rest is lazy when actually neither of those things are true. So I'm really inspired by efficiency and
Hmm.
by doing less to create more. And I have some really incredible mentors that I've worked with for years. My good friend Kate Northrup wrote the book Do Less, and I still look back at that book for just a reminder quite often. And there's a way of being that we can be really productive without spinning and without rushing and without feeling like we're bound to our to-do list. And so
Hmm.
yoga has been incredible for me in that way. In it's, it's like my lifeline. And I don't know how I would have gotten through single parenting or running a business on my own without that practice. Um,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
then I take these groups of people on retreat. I actually do forest bathing on some of my retreats with my guests. And what's so wild is just watching people on day one of the retreat, and then maybe like day 4 or 5, if it's a week-long retreat. And I honestly can tell you that their faces change. They like soften and they just become so much more kind of like relaxed and at peace. And there's not as much frantic energy in the group because people are like letting go. And
Yeah.
that is one of the greatest joys for me in leading retreats, actually, is just watching people kind of come home to themselves in a way that they can actually give themselves permission to relax. In my book, I talked about it as that we start off, in this collective rock polisher, and on retreat over the week, we become like our edges get softened and we just sort of become smoother. And
Hmm.
it's an amazing thing to watch. So I just think that the more that people can carve out space and time, whether it be a day or a weekend or a week, multiple times a year, that they can take breaks and give themselves space to relax and teach themselves to relax. Sometimes relaxing feels hard, as you mentioned. I can
Oh
totally
yeah.
relate to that. And I'm getting better at it because of so much time at our cabin and of so much like focus on it. And sometimes I catch myself swinging back into an old pattern, of course, but now I catch myself quicker. So, it does come with practice, but it is something that we can train ourselves to do. And it is a way that we can use so many different aspects of our daily life to influence uh, that way of being where we're not in that chronic fight or flight response that is sort of addictive. It can feel really addictive to be busy and
Yeah.
to drive fast and to feel angst all the time about like getting our stuff done. And then I realized most of the time I can ungrip the steering wheel, I can drive slower, I don't have to rush as much to get the same amount of stuff done. And I've proven that to myself multiple times. And so now I just keep trying to remember on a regular basis. And just to come back to your original point about gratitude, it changes everything. Like it literally changes our biochemistry. And
Mhm.
it is one of the most impactful things that I consistently practice in my day to day. And I'm so glad,
So
grateful for like gratitude, really, because it's so impactful.
yeah, so I was in I was in the Himalayas in January in India. I went to see some family, but I said, I'm going to go to North India because I've never been. I've always been to South India. I wanted to see the Himalayas, and so it was me and the kids, and we went up there and we stayed. We stayed up in the mountains. We went and traveled to these monasteries, and one of my bucket list items was chanting with Tibetan monks in the monasteries in the Himalayas. We got to do it, and it was one of the probably highlights of my life is to be able to go do that.
Wow.
And it was at one of the few times in my life where I was just like very calm, very present, and I didn't think about anything. My mind was completely clear, and I walked away from that experience saying, I have to do more of that, be present, because depression's thinking about the past, anxiety is thinking about a future that hasn't transpired, and being present is just being mindful and be giving your best in that moment or enjoying that moment as much as possible, right? So this is a great transition because we're heading off to Bali to do your episode,
Yeah.
and you're heading out first, and then we're going to be there in about 2.5 weeks. I went to Bali in 2017 when the kids were younger, and this is a nice little trip because now they come full circle. Now they're older, they could enjoy the sights, the sounds, really get into it much more. So Bali is a health and wellness destination on very many levels. And you mentioned to me in a conversation I had with you and my director on our last call that kind of really told me a little bit more about the country. I didn't know the country that well. And that is that they make rituals out of every routine, from
Mhm.
dinner to minor practices. And they find the beauty in the simple things, which I really like. I like that. It's very similar to the Japanese culture. So we know that Bali is a health and wellness destination, but what made you choose doing your retreats out there? And what have you taken away from all these retreats you've done out there? How's that changed you over time?
Oh, yes. Thank you for asking this. I love talking about Bali. So I ended up going to Bali because a good friend of mine lived there for a year,
Hmm.
and she was my neighbor, and she had taken her kids for a year to go to the Green School, which is an international school that's very eco-friendly and sustainable living and all of that sort of thing, founded by John Hardy, who's actually kind of a well-known man in Bali. And so basically she was like, if you want to lead a retreat here, now's your chance because I can help you plan it because I'm living there. And I had only been going internationally to Costa Rica at the time. So I basically co-created my retreat with her. She didn't lead it with me, but she just helped me with all the logistics and the planning and all the places we should go and stuff. And then I went, and it was life changing for me
Hmm.
as a person, and everything about it. The food was so good. The access to healing and modalities like massage therapy and reflexology and different kinds of qigong and all these different things were really enticing for me. And we had an incredible retreat. It was obviously like gloriously beautiful. And it was just like I'll always go back to Bali. And so I just kept going back every year, and I've been there every year since, minus the
Hmm.
pandemic. So this will be my 11th retreat in Bali, and I have a really close knit family of Balinese people there that I consider some of my close friends, because it's been years now in the making that we have known each other. And Bali is so devotional. And I don't know if
Hmm.
you remember the airport, but even
Oh
their
yeah,
even
yeah,
the
yeah.
airport's in the shape of a temple. But it's
Hmm.
interesting because their daily offerings and ritual that is integral in their spiritual practice, their Hindu culture. It's Balinese Hindu, so slightly different, but similar to Indian Hindu. Um,
Hmm.
they're using their offerings 3 times a day, um, to create protection and to offer to the gods and goddesses and all of the things. And that's even happening like in the airport. Like you will come across a little offering on the ground with a stick of
Yeah.
incense, and that
Yeah.
would be so odd in somewhere like, where I live in Colorado. So just that practice is so beautiful. 3 times a day, they're coming to this prayer and ritual and offering that is so intentional. And what goes into making the offerings is a lot of banana leaf weaving and a lot of flowers and
Yeah.
all the things. So then you kind of extrapolate from there and you see, the detail that Balinese focus on for beauty. And sometimes we might think of it as like luxurious, but even in the very most simple homes that are in the most simple villages where there's no affluence or wealth, there's these incredible uh, altars and statues and temples that are simple, but they make them beautiful in these very simple ways. And so that goes with their cooking as a ritual, their bathing. I mean, Bali is known for their flower petal baths, which is one of the most incredible experiences that I love to have when I go there. Um,
Hmm.
there's just flower mandalas, and there is, just like lotus flowers opening in the most majestic positions and places around the island. And, it's just very intentional. And I thought about it a lot when I was writing my book, because a lot of times the excuse for us in North America in not doing that is that we're too busy.
Hmm.
What's interesting is I believe the Balinese are also busy. They have a lot of things to do. They have to make money and feed their kids, and sometimes they're farming rice fields, or they're cooking meals for their entire extended family, or they're doing their own laundry by hand, what have you. They're definitely not laying around just being like spacious with having all this extra time, but it's a priority. And it's something that is embedded in their culture as a way of connecting to the divine. And beauty and spaciousness and ritual and devotion, that's just their gateway. And we can learn so much from that, whether we take it on in a spiritual way or in more of a just a habit that we want to create in our lives. I mean, it changes everything. It's kind of like gratitude. It takes an ordinary thing like eating dinner and turns it into an extraordinary experience that has so much more meaning and so much more beauty and so much more intention. And I just feel like that influence on my life has been incredible, but also like on many of the clients that I've seen and brought to Bali, it's just been wonderful to introduce them to those simple but very potent ways of being throughout the day and throughout our lives.
Yeah, it's interesting. Western culture does not take enough time to find peace in daily routines. So I've traveled around the world, and I was in India in January. People take 3 or 4 hour lunch breaks, take a nap, come back to work. I was in Australia. They kind of do the same thing, and just all the parts of the world have learned to realize that work is not your life. Life
Mhm.
is life, and that's what I'm hoping through our show and through doing seeing guests like such as yourself, that we can kind of give this mentality to people, saying that yes, we all have to earn a living. Everybody's busy. There's enormous poverty in countries like this, more than the United States. But guess what? They find the joy in life in the simplest things, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that's kind of the purpose of having somebody like yourself on, going and filming out there in Bali, which we're so excited to go do because we're becoming more international with season 2. So this is a good transition, because I want everybody to be able to find you and connect with you and talk to you. So share with us your website. Are you doing any speaking tours? What books you have out? People can reach out to you so people can connect with you as the world gets to know you.
Oh, thank you. That's so awesome. Yeah, so everything I do is really basically under bouldernutrition.com, and that's Boulder, the town of Boulder, Colorado.
Mhm.
nutrition.com, and that's where all of my private work is and all of my online work is, and also all of the retreats that I lead and various other things like articles I've written and podcasts I've been on and things like that. So there's a ton there because it's basically been building for 20 plus years in my
Yeah.
business. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I have an Instagram channel or Instagram page at Boulder Nutrition. That is also another place that I like to be to just share some of my tips and tricks and, daily practices and rituals and kind of inspire people that way. And then last spring, in April, my book Food and Freedom came out, and it's available on my website and at all the big, the big
Hmm.
outlets. And that has been such a beautiful experience just to be able to get to share that with the world and then to launch it and be hosted on so many different podcasts and radio shows and, um, you know, vlogs and things like that. So I've had an incredible year of meeting incredible people and being really expanding my business and my message to the world. So I'm really grateful for that. I think that's about it. And
And
yeah,
then, do you have any books that people can look up to find you?
so yeah, my book is Food and Freedom. It's
Okay.
Discover Your Personal Recipe to Eat, Think, and Live Well. And this is a combination of food psychology and functional nutrition with a yogic twist in some of it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's got lots of great practices that you can implement, and it's got some great recipes. But really, the heart of it is really the culmination of my work. So, it was a great honor to have that experience. So,
No, that's great. So, for everybody watching out there, definitely connect with Sue. We're going to be filming her episode here in the next couple of weeks. Check us out at myrecipeforwellness.com. You can find trailers to the show, meet our guests like Sue. We'll have a profile up for her, and we'll have all our podcasts uploaded up there. But we're excited and can't wait to see you. And thank you for joining our movement. We really appreciate the time.
thank you. It's such an honor to be part of your movement and to this mission, and I can't wait to be in Bali with everyone.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for watching this episode, and we will be posting more episodes of season 2 throughout the weeks. But once again, thanks for everybody's time, and we'll see you on the next episode of Recipe for Wellness.
Thank you.